Hey, hi. So I had an epiphany today. Well, it's something that I kind of already was aware of, but it was brought back to my attention in a deeper way. But I'm going to tell you a story first, a real story. So, but before I go into that story, I want to discuss my favorite book. Well, one of my favorite. I'm not going to discuss the book, but one of my favorite books is called The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, Ruiz. And in this book, he discusses four agreements you make with yourself. And if you apply them in your life, it will improve the quality of your life. It will, you will experience more joy and more peace in your relationships and in your life entirely. And so one of those agreements is called, or is not called, it's do not make assumptions. That's the agreement, is do not make assumptions. And there's so many layers to that um, that I don't think he talks about. But it's more practical that I want to share from my experience. So this is how I'm going to explain it. So a few years ago, so I have a 19-year-old daughter, and so at the time my daughter was 15. Yeah, and so I remember, I don't know what we were discussing, but I think we had like a little mini disagreement on something. And I swear to you guys, I remember feeling in that moment that I was being polite, that I was being kind in what I was saying to her. And at that time, it mattered to me a lot. My relation, what still does, of course, my relationship with my children are very important to me, just like every relationship is to me with the people that I love, but more so with my children. And so, um, so if I had disagreements with her, it mattered that I grow from those disagreements. So in that moment, I thought I was expressing myself to her in a polite way. And so she ends up telling me that I wasn't being very kind. And I remember being a little, defensive and a little offended because I remember telling her, but I am being polite. I am being kind to you. But thank God, in that moment, there was a little gap, a little space where I was curious. I was genuinely curious because I was surprised because especially when I interact with my kids, I think I'm doing the best I can to be aware if I am, how my tone is coming across and how I'm expressing myself. And so at that time, when she said that, I was really taken aback. I was surprised. And thank God I was aware enough to ask a question. I asked her, so I'm not being kind? And she's like, no, you're not being kind to me. You know, you're not being very nice about it. And so I asked her, well, okay, so how could I have said that in a kind way? And she told me, and she was able to tell me how I could have said whatever it is I said to her, how I could have said it to her kinder. And when I heard her, I realized, because I saw the comparison, I remember exactly what I had said to her in that moment. And then I heard how I could have said it. And she was right. And I said to her, wow, you're right. That does sound kinder when you said it. And compared to how I said it, that sounds really rude. And so, it takes a lot of courage for a parent to step back and to recognize, man, I kind of messed up, like in that moment, and to apologize. And it takes a lot of courage to apologize in that moment. And so I did. I think I apologized to her, and I told her I was willing to work on that. I was willing to say things like that, or to make sure that next time I talk to her, that I am being a lot more kinder and respectful. And so that was years ago. Well, she's 19 now, so what, that was 4 years ago, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And that seemed like so long ago, but that was one of the most important experiences that I had as a parent to her, because that is one of the things that helped improve my relationship with her and with and any child that came after that. Well, I have two other ones at the time, of course. So, but it was something that I was able to now apply to all my relationships. But, there's different layers to that. And sometimes you experience something, I had to experience that again with other people in my life for it to hit home even more. And so the epiphany that I had recently is sometimes it may not be your child, but it could be your spouse, or it could be your partner, it could be whoever, right? May tell you that you're being a certain way with them. And it's easy to get defensive. It's easy to be like, no, that's not true. But I think an important thing, if you really want to have that relationship that you want with the person you love, like if of course it matters to you. Of course you want a relationship with your loved ones. But it's like taking it a step further and recognizing that if your loved one is telling you, you are doing this thing, it's making me feel this way, or I feel like you treat me this way, and let's say you're the one being told, like, let me pretend it's me, right? It's me, just like in the example of my daughter. Let's say it's, another person telling me, I feel like you treat me this way, or the other day you treated me like this, or you said this to me, and I feel like you were being this thing, XYZ. It's easy to feel, it's quick, it's easy to immediately go, no, I wasn't doing that. You're hearing things, or that's just how you're seeing it. And so it's easy to be able to do that. I know I've done it too. And so one huge step to improve a relation, or not even to improve, but to move towards the relationship that you really want with the person you love, is to be curious. Stay in a state of curiosity and ask the person. Like, give the person the benefit of the doubt that maybe they're right. And it's hard to say that. It's hard to feel that. Even if you don't say it, it's hard to be like, well, I know I'm not like that, because, we tend to really think we know ourselves, right? And we want to be the best versions of ourselves. So when we have someone tell us, you did this, it is hurtful, because especially if you're someone who feels like you bring a lot of awareness to your life. And so if you're there and knowing that about yourself, that you're sure you didn't do that, let's set that aside for a second. Because you love the person, because you want a relationship with this person, have the courage, because it takes courage to say, okay, so what did I do? So, like in the case of my daughter, for example, it's like, wait, I was being rude? Yes, you were being rude. Oh, so two important things when it comes to curiosity is asking two very good questions. Number one, well, first, being curious. Be curious, like, that's interesting that this person that I love is thinking that I did this to them. Okay, so stay curious. Number two, ask, what did I do? Well, you did this and you did this. Oh, and so let's say they're claiming that you're being rude. Let's just say that. With that case, let's say with my daughter, like, you're being really unkind. Okay. Oh, I was being unkind? Where? Where was I being unkind? But not like, you see, it's important that your attitude, though, is of genuine curiosity, because if it's not genuinely curious, you are going to come across with that defensiveness of like, so it's going to then sound like this. Where was I rude? Or, well, I wasn't rude to you, you know? But instead it's like, oh, I was rude to you? Where? Because you're genuinely interested. You're genuinely curious. You're not, you're shocked. You're surprised because you know for sure you work on yourself and you know that you do what you can to come across in a loving way. So, of course, you're going to be surprised, but then become curious. So then it's like, okay, where did I do that? And then they'll tell you, right? Well, you did this and this and this and this. And then another very important question, because you may hear that and you may still think to yourself, that's not rude, or that's not at all. Like he or she is describing it to me. And this is what you're thinking, right? Like, that still doesn't sound rude to me. Okay, very important thing after that. Everyone defines and experiences things differently than you. And so it's good to ask the person, how do you define, or what is rude to you? Like, how do you define rude? How do you define unkindness in this situation? So in this situation, how was this unkind to you? Or how was this rude to you? And then they'll tell you, well, it was rude because this and this and this, because you used this word, or because your attitude when you told me, or whatever it may be. And then you learn something. This is so beautiful. You get to learn something new about the person you love. You get to learn, oh my gosh, this is how they understand the word rude. This is how they interpret it in their lives. This is how they experience rudeness in their life. And so then the third question, or the third, whatever, the next question is, how could I have said that different? How could I have approached you then in a loving way? Because if you're saying that I was rude, how could I have said that more kinder? And they'll tell you, they'll say, well, if you would have said this, if you would have interacted with me like this, if you would have come to me like this. And so then, not only do you have an understanding of your loved one, of how they interpret that topic or that whatever it is, now you know how they interpret it. And so now it makes sense. And so then what you end up saying is like, wow, hearing your definition or hearing your interpretation or your experience of rudeness, and now that I know that that's rude to you, well, no, you know what? You're right. I was being rude. And I think that's what I told my daughter, I think. I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but I did say that. I said, oh my gosh, you're right. Yeah, I think I did say that. So then what happens is then you validate the experience for that person, for your loved one, because they're right. And it's not about making someone right or someone wrong. This isn't about that. It's because you really recognize, wow, of course. No wonder they thought I was rude. Because now I know how they define rudeness and how they experience it and how they interpret it in their life. Well, of course they would think that I'm being rude. Of course they think I'm rude because they're right. Hearing their definition of that, of course they're right. I was being rude. Now is the fun part. Now you got feedback on like how you can now talk to them in a different way where they can hear kindness. And so that's the tricky part though, because we get very, very defensive sometimes. We feel like, okay, great. So now I'm sorry, I have to be this way towards this person because they think I'm rude. So because they hear rudeness, now I have to change for this person. Okay. I could already hear like people thinking that. And it's like, that's where I go back to the first thing I said, is that if your relationship matters to you, if you want a relationship, so that's another thing. Do you want a relationship with this person? Do you want a relationship with your children? Do you want a relationship with your spouse, with your girlfriend, with your boyfriend, whoever it may be? Do you want a relationship with them? Well, of course I want a relationship with them. Sometimes that will take a little bit of adapting and evolving and to that person. It's like, this person hears this rudeness in this way, so it matters that I talk to this person in this way so that I can be heard, so that they can hear me in what message I'm trying to tell them without them feeling rude. Now, I could also, or without them thinking it's rude. Now, I could also hear other people or other thoughts. Let's say not people, but I can hear other thoughts of, well, hold on. Oh, what about the person? Shouldn't they evolve? Shouldn't they change? Shouldn't they just get better at not being offended? Absolutely. That's what inner work is. Inner work is your own work. So you working, so in a for a relationship to function and become the best version of itself, you got to also understand that there's two works going on. There's your inner work and there's your partner or your loved one's inner work. And if each person works on themselves, right? If you practice looking at your insecurities, at the things that you can improve on, the more you work on yourself. And we all hope to have a partner or a loved one who can also do that, right? Imagine that. Imagine two people working on themselves, and that when they have a disagreement, they're looking at what part they played in it without looking at the other person, and just looking at yourself, like, where could I have done better? Now, and that's the tricky part too. It's because if we're just focused on, like, well, let's say you don't think you did anything. That's possible. It is possible for you to be like, I didn't do anything. Like, I didn't say anything to her or him to hurt him or her. It's in their head, or that's their problem. Okay. But remember, we're going back to that first thing. If this relationship is important to you, if it isn't, then obviously you don't have to have a relationship with anybody. You don't. It's your choice. But if you really want one, then it takes a lot of that introspective work of, like, okay, I don't think I did anything, but let me be curious. What is it that they said? What is it that they're upset about? They think that I don't prioritize them. Let's say that's what it is. Okay, well, let me go ask them about that. Hey, you said that that you don't think I prioritize you. Can you tell me how I don't do that? And then go a step further. What does prioritizing mean to you in a relationship? And then when you get to hear their definition or their understanding of that term, then you can choose. You can choose. You may feel like that's too much. I don't think I can do that for that person. Then that's a real conversation to have with that person. Like, this is what you want, and I don't think I can give that to you, and here's why. But more than likely you can. More than likely, if you really care about the relationship, you will find that you'll be willing to do certain things. This isn't about, like, giving the person doing whatever they want. This isn't about that, and it's not about forgetting, like, it's not even about being someone else. If that's not who you are, if that's not who you are and that's not who you want to be, that's different. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about something much more simpler, like the one with my daughter. I really love her. I really wanted a good relationship with her. And so it was something that didn't feel like a sacrifice. It didn't feel like, okay, now I have to be these things because she's so sensitive. No. It was such a beautiful learning opportunity. It was an opportunity for me to be the best version of myself, because deep down, that's what I want. I want to be the best version of myself to every person that I meet. And you could only do that at your own pace. You could only do that with what you're aware of at the moment and what you're conscious of. And so taking that step further and being curious and asking yourself, even that could be another thing. Can I do this for this person? Do I feel like I'm having to conform so much just for this person? Do I feel like I have to change myself for this person just so this person can feel loved? Like, those are really good questions. But most often, more often than not, you will find that it is something that you can do, and it is something that you want to do because you want to maybe be heard in a way that is loving. So let me see if I covered all my bases here. So stay curious, because remembering your why. I love this question. What is your why? Why are you doing this? Because if you know your why, that's going to be the natural encouragement and the natural motivation for you to stick to doing something. So asking yourself, what is my why? Why this is important. Why is this relationship important to me? And then when you know your why, then you're able to then be willing to remember that this relationship is important. And then you'll be able to stay curious and be willing to be curious and like, okay, I want a relationship with this person, and this person's upset with me about something. This person is hurt because they claim that I did something, and I really think it's an assumption. They're not even asking me about. That's okay. They may be assuming something about you. They may be assuming that you're rude. So instead of defending it and saying, well, I'm not rude, you're assuming that. That is your perception. Stop for a second and consider that in their world, because everyone has a world in here, you were living in your own understanding of your own view of the world that's in front of you. Each person has a different understanding of the world in front of them. And so being willing to ask that person, being willing to consider that that person may understand something very differently than you, and then asking them about it. And then dealing with it later if it's what's coming up for you. For me, it may be coming up that I don't like. Like, for me, honestly, in that moment when she said I was being rude or I wasn't being kind, later on I was able to look at that on my own time and say, man, what came up for me in that moment? Because I did feel defensive. But why did I feel defensive? Oh, right, I know why. Because it matters to me how people hear me. And if I thought, I messed up in this, how could I have messed up? I was so sure of myself, and so I took it personally. So asking yourself, why am I taking this personally? Why did it bother me that this person thinks this about me? Oh, right, because I work on myself. Oh, because like I do everything that I can to come across as loving, and I wasn't. And I took it personally because it reminded me of maybe a belief that I have about myself. Oh my God, it uncovered for me a belief that I am not good enough. And that's something you will need to look at, which I did. Like, oh my gosh, I still think I'm not good enough. I still think I'm not enough. I'm not enough. That's a me problem. That's not a problem of her or the people that I love. It's like, that's something I need to look at and that I can work with. So if I have this belief that I'm not good enough, oh my gosh, you can do so much with that. There's so many books out there. There's so many courses out there. There's so many things that you can do to build that confidence in yourself, to build that self-love, to gain that self-worth that you have, and to recognize it. And then you have this opportunity to adopt a new narrative, to adopt a new belief system for yourself. So there's like it's a double whammy. Is that how you say it? It's just a win-win. It's like, not only do you get to learn something about your loved one, you get to understand how they perceive the world. You get to improve your relationship with them because you're willing to hear them out and see if you can work on that in yourself. I'm like, okay, my loved one hears me as rude. Okay, where did they say? How did they say? Okay, that's hard for me because I don't talk like that. I don't normally speak in those terms, but maybe I can kind of be more kinder in my own way, like through my own way of saying it. I'm sure I can work on that, or maybe I just need to learn a new language. Maybe not language maybe I can learn a new way to express kindness, and that's gonna be fun. That can be a challenge that I'm willing to take on, because why? We go back to the big why, our big why, because my relationship matters to this person, with this person, and it matters to me. So yes, stay curious, and wonder a little bit more. Like, why is this person thinking this about me? Oh, right. It could be that they're understanding that word differently. It's easy to also give people, to get upset with them and tell them, oh, well, you're wrong because you're the only one who thinks that. Okay, could be that the person you love is the only person in the whole wide world who defines kindness in the way that they explained it to you. It could be, but do you want a relationship with that person? You might not. You might not think it's worth it. You might not think, well, no, I have to change way too much for this person, and that's okay. You are free to not have one with that person. But we're talking about if you want a relationship with the person that you love, and what you're willing to try, how you're willing to change the way you talk or your tone. And you know what? It's also the person who's hurt. It's also their job to do the inner work. But really, let's be real. How many people are working on themselves in your life, in your relationships? How aware is your partner really? How aware is your children? Your children are children too. They're young. They're starting off in this life. How aware are your friends? Remembering that not everyone is at the same level of awareness as you, and working with that. So it could be that for a while, you're doing a lot of this inner work for yourself, and all you can do is model it. All you can do is become the best version of yourself, and in hopes that maybe you model it enough that your loved one can see through experience with you how that can look. And if they learn it, great. If they don't, you sure got a lot that you're gonna be growing a lot in this relationship, because you're doing a lot of that inner work. Okay, so that's it. I hope you learned something. I hope you took something away from this. I know I did, and I know that I'm gonna really be leveling up in my relationships through this experience. And I'm really excited about staying curious, even for me, and practicing it. It takes a lot of practice and awareness. So, all right, until next time, bye.